Right. Hi. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was wonderful to have been witness to this film. I think like what I can't on myself throughout the middle of there were so many dynamics actually brought together this experience.
Saransh, you have frozen.
Hi, so sorry, disturbance.
Could you
I
just repeat what you said because your voice broke and you also froze.
am I audible right now?
Yeah.
All right. I'm so sorry. Some connection issues. So yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. But for the audience's sake, I wish to introduce you today. So a little bit about Ratnaboli Ray. Ratnaboli Ray is an Ashoka Fellow, trained psychologist and mental health activist who is the founder of Anjali, a rights-based organization based in Kolkata, West Bengal, which works for persons with mental health condition or psychosocial disability. Aparna Sanyal is a national award winning filmmaker who has worked extensively on documentaries and TV shows as a director and producer for both Indian and international television since 1999. She is the co founder of Red Door, an initiative on mental health. So I welcome you both here. I think it's a privilege to have both of you together on this platform. And just to begin with, Miss Ray, it's as I had earlier mentioned that like so many dynamics actually make this a very rich film, and I imagine for the director and for the film crew to be together in one space is such a difficult experience, especially when the protagonist her own story. And it's a rare occurrence where the protagonist is taking control of the film and deciding what emotions, what intensities of those emotions are, you know. So my first question to you would be, what prompted you to make such a film? And yeah, just share your journey with us while making this film.
Thanks, Saransh. Hi, Aparna. And I'm very grateful to Belongg to be hosting this film and to sort of have a conversation around it because this film is not just a standalone film. It could be a standalone film, but conversation and triggering of dialogue is critical. So thank you, Belongg. I'm very happy to have Aparna as my co-panelist, and I have known about Aparna and Aparna's work for a long time. In fact, I'm very familiar with Red Door's work, which she co-founded. So, hi, Aparna. Um, Saransh, a quick addition. I'm a trained psychologist, and activist title was not was given to me, and it was not a self-embracing kind of title. I became an activist, you know, in the process of the 20 years that I have been working with Anjali. Now, coming back to your question as to what prompted us to make this film, I don't know if the audience with us is familiar with our work. Very quickly, a short introduction to Anjali. Anjali is a rights-based organization. Yes, it evolved to a rights-based organization. When it got registered in 2001, we didn't even know that we would evolve as a rights-based organization. We were a mental health organization, and we were working inside the public mental health institutions, the Sarkari mental health institutions, and started a very humble, tiny program, which was essentially to look at rehabilitation, quote unquote, of women, of long-staying women who were languishing in mental hospital. That's where we began. So the protagonist that you see has been part of our program. So Atasi was no stranger. Atasi was a very active participant of our program. She participated in the social inclusion, in the capacity building part of the program. We actually traced her family. We had a discussion with her doctor and her family members, because obviously she recovered and there was no reason for her to be languishing in mental hospital. And finally, as we won the trust of both Atasi and the family members, she could go back home. And Atasi, being who she is, always kept in touch with us, always shared her personal, intimate secrets, if I may say so, with us. Her family would land up in our office, because our office is a very open space. Anybody can drop in at any point of time, can rest, can have a cup of chai and have a conversation and then leave. So they were very much in touch with us. And so we were very interested in looking at sexuality, romance, and intimacy of women with quote unquote psychosocial disability. And we had approached many people rejected us, and then they said that, Ratnadi, I don't feel very confident. The family members said, oh my gosh, no. But Atasi was very spirited. She said, yes, why not, Ratnadi? Yes, I will participate. And the idea struck us when she came and told us about a little encounter with Sandesh. And that is how we had several meetings with her family members, because it also meant that we would be invading, quote unquote, their private spaces, and if they were all right. So every point of making the film, we would check with them and do a pulse check if they are okay. And many scenes have been edited out because they did not agree on having them on the film. And it's not that the Atasi is the first film. We have been making films since 2005. There are many films that we made. And Love in the Time of Madness is a series of 3 short films, and Atasi being one of them. 3 Sisters will release soon. It's about 3 sisters and a road trip. And third is about an interaction between Kajol and me, who was languishing in Baharampur in the district mental hospital where we were. So essentially, if you ask what was the trigger, I think the trigger was to make people like Atasi visible in the public domain, because there are so many myths around women with quote unquote psychosocial disorder, quote unquote mental health condition. And the first reaction that I have received after this film from the audience is she really mad? So then people start questioning the legitimacy of her madness because she's so articulate. So that's the first question. So yeah, this is part of our repertoire. This is part of our work, and we do documentation through films, through conversations, through infographics. So this is just one of them. Yeah, Saransh.
Yeah. So thank you for actually sharing that with us. Aparna, during the film, I realized that how few such films are there in India, which actually explore this reconciliation, this process of reconciliation after their incarceration, or being termed as quote unquote mental, right? Your films have beautifully captured not just individual narratives, but also the culture and the ecosystems around those narratives. Do you think that filmmakers who tackle the issue of mental health should be more careful with their depictions of the narratives as well as mental health issues?
Thanks, Saransh. And again, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor, and even more so because Ratnadi is here. I have known her and her incredible work for a while now. She's a mentor to Reshma, and therefore also to me, Reshma is the co-founder of the Red Door. And Resh, I mean, she calls Ratnadi Bong Ma. So it's like another mother in a sense to Resh. So so really, I mean, it's I can't tell you how delighted I am to be on this panel with you, Ratnadi, who has done some incredible work with institutions in West Bengal. Saransh, that's a very interesting question, and I think. Mm, I think we can, divide the way in which people approach mental health issues in a few ways. So one is when you have, say, non-fiction filmmakers, and I think they tend to be a little more careful about their depiction, as opposed to, say, mainstream, media. Where we are seeing a different kind of conversation emerging with time, now that it's becoming easier to talk about mental health issues. But even there, there are certain conceptions that, are sort of spoken of, which, when one watches, you really cringe inside and you're like, no, 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 that's not really how it is, and so on and so forth. But I think, I mean, to come back to Atasi, the film, what I really liked about it and what Ratnati also spoke of was, it's so important to keep in mind everybody who's involved in that in that process of filmmaking. It's not just the protagonist, but also the family members. Because as a filmmaker, you wield enormous amounts of power when you have the camera with you, and it is really important to be mindful of the power that you have, with that little piece of equipment in your hands. And it is up to us to make sure that we represent whoever we're filming with honesty, with empathy, and with a lot of care. So and I think that is something that really comes across in this film, because you're not left thinking that this person is a villain, or there's something wrong with that person or anything like that. You feel for each of the characters, and we never get to know why things happened the way they did. We, the little clues along the way, but we don't really know for sure. And I think that's beautiful, because sometimes circumstances are just strange, and you just don't know why people react the way they do. And I think that there is a kernel of truth there about our own lives and our realities, which I think the film manages to capture beautifully. So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, definitely. And I do hope, that whether it's the fiction filmmakers or non-fiction filmmakers, people become more mindful as we go along in the mental health journey. Because, of course, I mean, a decade back, I think like things were quite different, and we're looking at a post-pandemic world. Ms. Ray, I wanted to ask you This film was made in 2018, and we are amidst a pandemic. Do you think that this film would have taken a different direction altogether if it was being made today? And why would that be the case?
Saransh, I really don't know why we sort of centering all our conversation around the pandemic, because this is not the first pandemic. There have been many pandemics before. Even the flu was a pandemic. Even invisibilization of people with psychosocial disability has also been a pandemic, right? Pandemic maybe would have impacted, just like it has impacted many of our lives, maybe it would have been more difficult for Atasi to find her love. And her love would have been unrequited. For us, we would have had conversations after conversation because we do have the privilege of being digitally connected. And she is very, very smart, Saransh. Yeah. But yes, I mean, the logistical part of it, because of the pandemic, would have prevented us from documentation and would have impacted Atasi in finding her love and the physical intimacy, because they also met on Facebook. So they would have continued. And also, you know, the fear that has been generated because of the pandemic also needs to be challenged. Because I think the whole war metaphor that has been circulating is also very dangerous for our mental health. Because this is not a war, this is a public health crisis, and state should appropriately respond to this, and we as citizens should respond to it. And this whole business of, you know, this being a new normal, etc., it's all extremely baffling things. And this is no new normal. Pandemic has happened before, pandemic is happening now, and we should be able to encounter it. And let's not fall into the trap of you know, being extra frightened. We have to do what we have to do, because world will not come to an end. But yes, impact definitely. Logistical problems would have arrived. Yeah, sure. But I'm not going to sort of overprivilege the COVID situation. But having said this, it is also important to state that I'm not normalizing COVID also. It is a reality and we have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, I too am conflicted about you know, the conversations which are going around about pandemic and our mental health being impacted by the pandemic, because the gaze seems to be quite different. It seems to be centering the suffering than the sufferer, and the film beautifully captures the life of the sufferer, you know, and takes us through that journey, right? Of Atishi actually. Yes, sorry. Uh, yeah. So it
There is
also.
no one, you know, Saransh, there is not one sufferer. I mean, it's just not Atasi, whose Atasi means a flower, by the way. Atasi is not just the victim, because her brother is also a victim, her mother is also a victim, and at the end of the film, I mean, people do empathize a lot with the mother.
Yeah.
Initially, they perceive her as the villain of the piece, but at the end of the film, they can't help but cry along with Atashi's mother.
Yeah.
I think I think the film has scored there.
Yeah, yeah. And it beautifully depicts the language of love, which somehow has increasingly lost meaning in mental health settings, especially one which is based around a medical centric viewpoint. So my next question to you, Aparna, would be that how has this language of love actually impacted your work at Red Door? Because I know that to know about all the good work that Red Door is doing and the impact that has been making since the time that you founded it.
Saransh, thank you for those kind words. I think we have learned a lot from people who have been working before us, right? So somebody like Ratnadi, we've really learned from her work. We've really learned from Bhargavi Davar's work. We've learned a lot from experiments done across the world, and now I think there is enough of a movement across the world which talks about the importance and really the need to bring these conversations around mental health outside of just the preserve of the experts, shall I say, and to sort of to really insist that communities need to get involved. I mean, if you look at what has happened, and I think the COVID experience is important and relevant only because for once we're talking about everybody's suffering, right? For once we're talking about how people are affected by things that happen to them, and this entire sort of narrative of mental health is not then restricted to a few people who can just be shut away from from public gaze, and then you forget about them, right? You can't shut out the entire world, right? So it sort of normalizes that conversation, and it also, I think, makes us sort of realize that mental health is too important to be left to others. We are all, and we have to be equal partners in this entire journey. We have to be we have to look at more ways in which the community can get involved. I mean, there are these statistics that are constantly sort of thrown around, right? So we only have X% of psychiatrists and Y% of psychologists and so on. And it's true, there's never ever going to be enough experts who will be able to take care of everyone. So we have to help empower ourselves and our communities to be the first a point of contact and the first point of succor, because without that, it's really not going to work. So I think there are enough examples. I really don't want to get into that at this point, but I think for us at the Red Door, it's really important that we look at ourselves, we look at people around us, we look at building these little bubbles of support, as we call it, because without those things, it's really difficult. I mean, life is difficult, life is hard, and all of us will go through mental health trouble, because that's just what life is all about. We have our down moments. We will lose people we love. We will have huge failures, that we would not have imagined possible. We will have hoped and aspired to achieving something, and maybe that didn't happen because of XYZ reasons. So these are all things that we will face. It is inevitable. And every time we face something like that, instead of sort of saying that, oh, okay, I'm now feeling this and there must be something wrong with me, is there a way in which we can actually empower people to reach out to their bubbles of support, like we call it, and really prepare? So one of the main things that we're looking at right now is the idea of resilience. And by resilience, I don't mean individual resilience where it's like you have to get up no matter what, but really societal resilience, or resilience as an idea that the community can support. And how do you do that? So because if we know that we are going to have a bad day or a bad phase, or we'll have this this little chunk of our lives where we will really not know why we want to get up the next morning, is there a way in which we can actually prepare for that? And I think that is something that we are very sort of interested in at this point, and it's something that we're actively working towards. And I think what has really helped us is the work that we've done with community schools, and that was really our sort of experimental phase in a way. So these two community schools in Pune, where we worked extensively with the children. So there was one particular batch of children where we worked for 5 years, so went with them from class 7 to 10. and then saw them, go into college and sort of saw what that did. And so that's the kind of long-term intervention that we're talking about, where we are not just dipping in and putting some band-aid, but really working with the kids to help them find their own ways of strengthening themselves and the friends around them. And that has been a great, it's been a great learning curve for us because of that work, and that has really informed all the work that we're now doing. So yeah, so I think we really believe in the idea of the community. And by community, I don't just mean the family one is born into, because that can also sometimes be the site of trauma and violence, but building a little tribe of people who believe in you and who you believe in.
Yeah, definitely.
If I may quickly add to what Aparna said, Saransh, may I?
Yes.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think also Red Door, people and groups like Red Door or Anjali is kind of trying to shift the paradigm. I think Red Door talks a lot about healing, and so do we. So when we talk about communities, there's also a overemphasis and privileging of a hegemonic idea of treatment. I think Red Door, Anjali, Bapu Trust, Tarasha, there is a critical mass of people who are trying to bring in a different kind of paradigm. It's about healing, it's about talking, listening, talking, and also, embracing multifaceted approach towards well-being. And we are also trying to shift the locus from illness to wellness. So not everything is a disease. It's also distress and suffering, like Atasi in the film. Thanks.
Ratnadi, couldn't agree more. I think there is a great need at, like you said, shifting the conversation from illness to wellness, and to stop labeling constantly and say that, oh, X is suffering from this or Y is suffering from that, yeah, and I think Atashi, that film, really beautifully depicts that, yeah. Go on, Saransh.
No, definitely. I very much agree with both of you. And also talking about community, importance of communities in our mental health work. This is one line which Atishi uses to describe or compare rather her being accepted in one community and not accepted being accepted in the other. And like it brings into focus the importance of the community in any work around mental health or well-being for that matter. So I just wanted to know from both of you, how has community played a major role in your own work? So anyone can answer that.
No, go first.
Ratnadi, are you going first?
Going first.
Okay.
I can, but
yeah. Sure. So I think for us, the idea of community has really been central to the work we do and to our belief system. We sort of started with, so I have to explain the Red Door to you, right? So this was just an experiment. Okay, so 2010 is when Resh and I met for the first time. So Reshma Valyapan, she's my other partner in crime. And at that point, I was making a film on schizophrenia, and Reshma was someone who'd been given a diagnosis of schizophrenia and paranoid schizophrenia. So if you go speak to any medical expert, any psychiatrist, they'll say, that's really like the big daddy of mental illnesses, right? You've had schizophrenia. So, I've had people tell me that, their doctors told them it would have been better if you had cancer. Because schizophrenia, though, you're really done for, there's really nothing, no hope left for you. You cannot be salvaged, you cannot be rescued. And Reshma was someone who had heard all of these sort of verdicts on her life and how her future was going to be, which is basically that, it's basically a waste. Your life is completely ruined if you've had schizophrenia. And she goes on, and thanks to a great support system, there is no denying that. I mean, I don't think Reshma would have been the story she was without the incredible amounts of support that she received from people around her. But she basically went on to create her own path of recovery, which in 2010, when I started working on the film, seemed really incredible to me. But the more I researched, I found that this was actually a trend across the world, that people were building their own, paths to recovery, using, methods that were of their own making, that came from a deep knowledge of who they were, and that came from doing a lot of reading, about themselves, about other ways of looking at the world. And which is why, because I was someone who was always a skeptic, but I found that, a lot of people with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, when they had self-healed, they had a certain imagination of what we commonly call spirituality, right? And it reminded me of that, sort of saying which says that the shaman and the mystic, the shaman, the mystic, and the madman, they swim in the same ocean. I began to wonder if there was some truth to that, and that sort of led onto a particular kind of journey. And Reshma and I, when I met her, it really seemed that all the research that I was doing, which was pointing me towards an alternative way of thinking about mental health, she was really the living embodiment of all of those things in a way. So we really struck it off, and we collaborated on this film, made this film. And once the film was made, then there was really like, okay, what next? The film is done. Is that the end of this journey? And that's when we decided that, hers was a story of hope and optimism, and that there were many other stories like hers. So was there a way in which we could, just keep talking about that, and so it really just started off as an experiment. And Reshma is a painter. She's an artist. She said, what, I'm just going to go out there and paint with people. And so it really just started off as an experiment. It was a thought experiment, really. Can you just, go and share your story and get others to share their stories with you? And, can something interesting happen from there? And, one thing led to another. And I think the credit goes completely to Reshma, because she was the one who was sort of doing this, because for her, this was her life in a way, so the Red Door for her was her life, and this was the way in which she was making sense of her own life. And that, which brings me back to this idea of the sense of purpose, that we must all sort of have in our lives, and that also is central to the work we do. So the Red Door, in a way, gave her a sense of purpose, and she found meaning in helping others, and bit by bit, the works just sort of kept building. It sort of took on a life of its own, and she went on to become an Ashoka Fellow as well. She was recognized as an Inc. Fellow, so people began to take her seriously. They began to listen to what she had to say. And like I said, when we started that work with the schools, that was really the time when all our thoughts, all our ideas, really found a very specific focus. And like I said, that has really been an incredible journey for us. And that, in a sense, has built the base for us. I feel like we're now ready to take, all our ideas, because we tried out so many experiments, and the kids helped us so much, and the kids helped us learn so much. They helped us grow. We were supposed to be helping them, but actually they helped us. So many of the ideas that we held, we had to re-examine them, discard many of those ideas, challenge ourselves in the way in which we went about things. So that was really interesting, right? And all of it throughout, involved the community. So when we were going out and doing painting in public parks, that was the community. When we went and we also did a lot of online peer support. So people would reach out to us, and we really believed in this sort of idea of the, the peer group and peer support. And we actually believe that the peer support model is strong enough to really take care of many things, and we've had all kinds of people approach us. And what we constantly talk about is that, you have to take the power back for yourselves. Don't expect the world to solve things for you. What you need is that support, so that you're able to do that. and that is all that we can offer. But eventually that path has to be walked alone. So so that is what we mean by community, being there as a good friend, just someone who can just give you a hand if you've fallen, and explaining this point of view to more and more people, because we believe that we have it within us to be an empathetic society, and it's our job, it's our duty. This is why we're human beings, right? And it's our job to be there for others. So really, so instead of saying that, okay, you have a problem, go talk to someone, say, hey, you have a problem, do you want me to listen to you? So we're hoping that that is the change that will happen. Instead of saying go seek help, you say, okay, what can I do to help? So that is for us what we mean by community.
So I will, thanks Aparna, because that was very insightful. I will just extend from Aparna's point of view about communities taking charge of their own well-being, because I think that is the work that Red Door is doing. And also Anjali is doing. And Anjali, works in very resource-poor areas. It works in the remotest districts of Bengal. And we have a vertical called the Community Mental Health, which is essentially what Aparna said, building the resilience of the community, giving women, the resourceful women, to take charge of their lives and to take charge of their neighborhood and build a ecosystem which is centered on mental wellness. And we are also looking at community building through building intersectionalities. We are helping the women and the community to see how Bijli, Pani are also issues of mental health. So that kind of, takes the discourse of mental health from a medical, essentially from a medical stronghold to a more community, issue and developmental issue. Having said that, I also want to say a few words on how we understand community. For many, many years, we have imagined communities to be poor communities, where we are the benevolent actors. So we give it's a top-down approach where we give resource-poor communities help in terms of food, in terms of shelter, in terms of clothing. And I think it's important for organizations like Red Door, Anjali, to build the reciprocity. Because even if you look globally, communities are perceived in a way where global North is kind of dictating everything as to how the global South communities should look like. All the researchers are driven by global North, and we are just the passive recipients, and that politics has to change. We also have to remember that each and every, even institutions where we work is also a community. Community is not outside. Even a family where I'm sitting right now is also a community, because it mimics the characteristics of community. So what I want to end with is that when we are imagining communities, we also have to remember that these communities are personalities as well. They have their own history of civil rights. They have their own history of geography, the boundaries. They have their own history of the economics, and that shapes a community. So community is not just falls out of the vacuum and it becomes, and everybody starts talking about community. So you have to approach community with respect, with a sense of equality, and there has to be very strong reciprocity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, I mean, at this juncture, actually, I just wish to ask both of you, what now? Because I think, like, there is so much scope of collaborations, ideations, implementation, and Mental Health Act was passed in 2017. I really don't want to get into the implementation of the act yet, but so many actors have started to um, um, uh, rethink their strategies. So many actors have started to take into account various stakeholders. So many intersectional groups have started to take mental health as the priority. But when we talk about initiatives which are centered around intersectional mental health, how do you think they are doing, firstly? And how do you think that they might be going in the future? Where do you think we might land in the future, given the context of the country, obviously?
Saransh, your question is highly political. One. Second, it is not just one question. There are several questions within that larger question. Given the COVID situation, where do we go? While we have spoken, while Aparna also mentioned, while we have spoken a lot about mental health, I'm sorry to say the budget was announced right after the COVID pandemic, and we didn't see any increased allocation. And mental health requires resources. You cannot leave it to groups like Red Door, groups like Anjali to drive mental health in the country. Services are appalling, Saransh. Yeah. And if you do not have services, how are you going to ensure that your mental health is going to be okay even during the pandemic times? So while we speak about our anxiety, while we speak about our fear, while we speak about depression, if the constituency even is not ready to seek help, and even if they have this help-seeking behavior, if they do not have access, everything is going to fall apart. So resources in terms of services, resources in terms of money, resource in terms of intentionality has to be ensured. So where do we go from here is kind of demand accountability from the state actors, because I do not see NGOs filling up that space. No way, no way. Me, despite being a non-government organization. So our main job is going to be how we can increase services, how we can increase resources, how we can question the intentionality and make some meaningful impact at the community level. The other biggest challenge right in the country is the divisiveness and the polarization, because polarization and divisiveness feeds right into our mental health. So if there are young people watching our program, I would urge the young people to mobilize themselves and challenge the polarization, because religion was never, ever a point of polarization in our country till few years back. So I think We have to change our language too if we have to look forward, not going into the Mental Health Act. And I think we have to take charge and keep questioning and really come out of the bystander's role that we are comfortable in playing, because there is a seductive comfort in being a bystander and fence sitter. Break the status quo, break it, challenge it. That's the way forward. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Ratnadi. I think what I'd also, I mean, I think she's pretty much covered everything. But I think the only thing I'd like to add is that even now, when we talk about mental health, unfortunately, we're only talking in terms of the number of psychiatrists or psychologists, or number of beds, number of mental institutions. We're not actually looking at all at the human aspect, which we call the community. And I mean, I often wonder, I mean, if we actually put resources into something like that, and instead of just looking at this very overly medical approach that we seem to have adopted, if we were to actually look at ways to incorporate the community in this entire this entire initiative, to take better mental health to everyone, perhaps we would, with less money spent, have better outcomes. And I think at this point, we are at a place where there is enough evidence. We keep talking about evidence-based, decisions, policy decisions, and so on and so forth. I think there is more than enough evidence now that it really works to invest in, initiatives that place the community at the center, rather than this overly medicalized sort of approach. And I think there are some great examples in, the Scandinavian countries, in the UK, New Zealand, Canada, where they have shown how to do it. There are enough experts in the world who have shown how to do it. Even the WHO, speaks about this, so I don't understand why, and I can only think of it as, a situation where perhaps they don't have access to this information, this knowledge. I mean, that is the only thing that one can say, because I don't understand why something that is, that can be done more easily is not actually looked at, or is it more difficult to do? I mean, I don't know. I'm not in, in this entire policy sort of conversation that much, so I'm not sure why it doesn't happen. Why community initiatives are not given the kind of importance that they should be. But one hopes that, over time, it will change. And I don't know, I mean, I just feel like if this COVID experience helps us to shift the conversation, because surely you're not suggesting that everybody who's feeling anxious because they've lost a loved one should be given a pill, right? So then perhaps, finally we can have this conversation about the importance of community, and, having a place where you can come, share your anxieties, you share your fears, share your troubles, what you've been through. And if we can teach each other empathetic listening, perhaps we'll have, more, we'll have better mental health outcomes than any other sort of initiative that we support. So, yeah.
Yeah, taking away from your last sentence, I would say that the only hope is love in the time of madness. And really looking forward to Anjali's other films as well. Yeah. Any last comments from both of you?
I'm mighty pleased, Sharansh, to be on a panel which is driven by a young person. And that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of hope. Because, yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I mean, for me, it was just wonderful to be on the same panel as Ratnadi. And Saransh, I've known you as well for a while. So, and I've seen your journey. I think it's incredible that you're doing the work you're doing. So, I hope you carry on with this. And yeah, we all hope for a better future, a better, more understanding, world. Hopefully we'll all get there together.
Definitely, definitely. Yes, and thank you so much for taking time out. It had been a very, very wonderful conversation, and I couldn't have hoped for better speakers for today's discussion. Given that some organizations, if not more, are trying to have more conversations this month about mental health. So thank you so much, and looking forward for some really, really robust collaborations and so much love ahead. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, Saransh. We'll take this conversation offline.
Yes, definitely.
Ratna.